Hello, everyone. This is Brian Saber. I am here with Jerry at his table in his kitchen in his home in Connecticut, where we've been hanging out once a month for a while and talking about all the topics that everyone is always interested in the world of fundraising. And here's a juicy one for us. It is quid pro quo fundraising, when board members in particular ask their friends and family for gifts, and then their friends and family ask them for gifts in return. Jerry, what's your thought?
Okay, let me tell you what I'm finding. When I first started in the business, and this goes back 40, 50 years ago, quid pro quo was quite a factor. Look, I gave you $20,000 for your charity. That's what I'm asking you for mine. And I would expect it. I am finding now, Brian, more and more that donors are able to say, even to a friend, "Oh, sure, I'll make a gift, but it won't be close to what you asked. You know, your organization just isn't what I'm most interested in. And I do give generously, as you know, to the symphony in town and the Salvation Army and the Red Cross. And I'll make a gift of yours, but I won't give you nearly the $20,000 you asked for."
And is that in relation to that asker, that board member, having given $20,000 to this other person's organization, and that donor coming back and in a sense saying, well, you gave me 20 for mine, but I'm not going to give you 20 for yours?
Yeah, and that's more and more, I find that's what's happening.
Is that upsetting the donors then? I would think that unless the donor knew that there was a difference in capacity, that donor would be frustrated and would be saying, well, I just gave 20,000 to Joe, and Joe is only going to give 5 to me. How insulting is that?
And that works both ways also. If I were the asker, I would say, "Brian, we're very close, and you've been very generous when I've asked you for a gift. I want you to know that whatever you decide won't affect our friendship. I'd like you to consider a gift." Or that's the donor asking the person being solicited. Or the person being solicited would say, and I've done it myself, "Brian, first of all, you did a great job in talking about the organization. And I want you to know I'm not going to give you as much as you asked for. And I don't want this to affect our friendship. That's very important to me. I've decided over the past few years that I'm only going to give to organizations I really feel keenly about." And that usually does it.
Mm-hmm. So,
excuse me.
Yes.
I want to make sure it's not going to affect the friendship.
Yes. So this topic's been on my mind for a while, which is why I've brought it up to you. And as you know, I work with a lot of small organizations.
Yeah.
And what I see in those organizations, which I find so frustrating, is board members basically being told, okay, hit up your list. We're having a gala. We hope you'll send an invitation to everyone. We have an end of year letter writing campaign. We hope you'll send a personalized letter out to everyone. And so these board members, wanting to do the right thing, which they feel is what they've been asked to do, will send out these invitations and send out these letters, often get a very small return. Or when they get a return and someone buys 2 tickets to their gala, then is asked for 2 tickets to their friend's gala. And I find, most board members really can't stand this type of fundraising, that some of them are very frustrated because they feel they're more generous to their friends than their friends are to them. But the biggest issue I have is that in so many cases, board members, they do that job and say, okay, organization, I did that, and I got this $5,000 for you from 25 of my friends, but please don't bug them for anything else. I don't want you to contact them. I don't want you to send them newsletters or anything. And what happens often is the only relationship is between the donor and the board member. The donor never develops a relationship to the organization because there's this wall that the board member has set up, thinking, I don't want you to bother my friends. They gave this as a favor to me. And this is, as I say, this happens a lot in the small to mid-sized organizations where I do a lot of my work. And I keep thinking, well, we're going in circles here then, because we're not finding donors who are going to have a long-term relationship with us. So where are we really getting, and how difficult are we making it for our board members? They're doing the work for us, but they're doing it begrudgingly because it's terrible work.
Yeah.
So what do you think of all that?
Well, I think if the board member says, don't contact this person, that's a problem that can't be overcome. Interesting, I'm thinking back. In all of my experience, I've never had a board member say, don't contact this person. Not once. Isn't it interesting?
It is. Do you think some of it might be the dichotomy, though we've both worked with organizations over the spectrum, you being Jerry Panas and having this firm and doing so many capital campaigns, you've worked with more, I would think, more significant organizations. You've worked with so many universities, so many hospitals and such. And I've worked with some really little local social service agencies with $100,000 budgets where various board members are trying to raise $500 or $1,000.
Sure.
And I wonder if there's a difference.
I think that may be the case.
Yeah. Because I certainly didn't feel it when I did work for my alma mater. Right. And the board members of the trustees of the university were not doing what we're talking about, right? They were looking strategically for people. They were looking at alums who they knew, who they might be able to bring closer to the organization. It was different.
Yeah. I think that may make the difference. In that case, size of gift. Yeah, I can think of so many cases where the donor has said, I don't want this to affect our friendship. Mm-hmm. But your organization just isn't on my list. Yeah. And they're willing to say that. It's not easy. It's not easy to do.
Yes. Right. I mean, some people will want to avoid that conversation as much as they can. I've had board members say to me, and I can think of one in particular in Chicago at the moment, who said, I cannot stand asking my friends. Some of them I think are cheap. They could give more. I'm giving more to their organizations. I'm only raising a total of $3,000. Anyway, how about if I just give you the $3,000? And I say, great. I'd just as soon you give me your money and your friends give their organizations their money, because then you have a bigger investment here where you care. It gets back to the point you were making, Jerry, about giving your money where you care. And I see with so many of these mid-level donors, board members who are giving $5,000 or $10,000 at a $1 million organization. So they're giving $10,000 to this organization, and they're giving another 10 in little increments to all their friends, and raising that. And wouldn't it be nice if they gave the 20?
Exactly.
Where they care, and their friends gave their money to theirs.
Sure. The answer is that more and more I'm seeing that kind of fundraising is less and less.
Great.
Yeah. Less and less quid pro quo.
Well, that's a great direction for our nonprofit sector, I think.
Now, where there's a problem, and then it's up to the organization to provide proper stewardship, so that the donor feels keener about the organization and may even get involved. I don't think it's appropriate or proper or helpful for the donor to be attached to the salesperson, solicitor. It should be to the organization.
Right. So people often ask me about special events and fundraising, and there are hundreds of people at a gala. And I try to get them to see that most of those people probably won't have a direct relationship. They're there because you're honoring someone. They're there as a favor to someone at the table or something. There's a core group that will, and those are the people to focus on for the future. Do you do much in special events, and what do you see? Because a lot of the special events, let me clarify actually that the reason why I mention this is that organizations often depend on their boards to sell seats for the galas. They might have a requirement. Every board member has to buy or fill a table or something like that. So board members come through and do that, but it doesn't mean most of those people are going to be good prospects for the future.
You may not like my answer.
Go for it.
I think special events are tough. And I don't call that philanthropy. Not in the real sense. They're buying tables. And for instance, when the bank buys a table, does the president of the bank come and the chairman of the board? And no. They find who clerks there
exactly
can sit at the table. And that's not philanthropy. And if they did, and we do this all the time, if they did a study of how much they're really raising, it would be so much more effective to go for larger gifts and not do the special event.
Absolutely. Well, I love your answer. I happen to have a massive bias against special events. I love cultivation events and thank you events. But one, to your point, if people looked at all the true expenses of an event and they added all the staff time and all the immeasurable expenses, they'd find they raised a lot less. And if they took the board gifts out, because those board members would give their gifts generally whether there's an event or not, when you take all of that out, lots of these events for these smaller to mid-sized organizations in particular are not very effective. And of course, you have lots of people not making their biggest gift because they're buying a $300 ticket to a gala because that's what the price is when they could have given so much more. And yes, you have some tiers, but it's so hard to maximize people's giving. And then they feel, I gave to your special event.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So, and there's so much quid pro quo, getting back to our topic today, in those special events.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That you can drown in it.
But remember, I said I don't think that's philanthropy.
And which is a brilliant point, and I really like what you said there. Yes. Well, anything else to add on quid pro quo?
No, just that I think as you coach your solicitors, they better be prepared for that.
Yes.
And that's all right. I had an interesting thing. I'm interviewing a person who is an actuary. That's even one step beyond being an accountant. He's very generous. Very generous. One of his accounts, a client of his, is calling on him for a gift for goodwill. And he didn't know anything about goodwill. And when the client said, we would like you to consider a gift of $2 million, the actuary said, you know what? I didn't know anything about goodwill, but I'm rather interested. I think you guys are doing a great job. George, how much did you give to this project? Well, my wife is still talking about it, but I think it'll be around $2 million, same as I'm asking you. And the actuary was able to say, George, I handle your account. I know how much you're worth. And if you're asking me for $2 million, you should be giving $5 million. When you and your wife decide to give $5 million, come back and see me. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow. That's a great story.
Yeah.
That can only work when you happen to know the other person's estate so completely.
Sure. And not worry about losing the account.
Yes. So, and that gets to a question we touched on in another session, the solicitor versus the donor. When we're talking about volunteer solicitors, this idea of equity between them, if they're in the same league and asking for the same size gift, or can someone who can only make a lesser gift ask for a larger gift, and so forth.
Well, again, when I first started out, there was a hoary tale that you can't send a solicitor to see a person unless they have made a gift of that size or more. And we find that isn't true at all. If I'm coming to you for a $100,000 gift, or it could be $1,000 or $10,000, whatever it might be, and I'm thinking of you for $100,000, we're finding more and more the person being called on is asking, well, Brian, what did you give? More and more we're finding that. So we coach our solicitor to say, Brian, before I ask you for your gift, let me tell you what Felicity and I are giving. It's one of the largest gifts we've ever made in our life. And let me tell you why we're doing that. Now, in the early part, I talked about the organization. Now I'm talking about something very personal, why I made that gift. And if I say it's the largest gift I've ever made, I don't have to say how much it was. Or I can say, our gift was $50,000. You know me pretty well. You know that's a large gift.
I agree with that, actually, and I can recall my 10th college reunion where I was the gift chair.
Oh.
And I was earning 2 cents in the nonprofit world, but some of my peers 10 years out were already making quite a good chunk of change. And I was in that position of saying, I'm giving maybe $1,000 or $2,000, maybe it was a little bit more, which for me was the largest gift I had given and very significant, and being able to ask them as well. So I agree with that very much, and I think if we could share that with others, they'd feel more comfortable
and Brian,
in their role.
And when you say, let me tell you why we decided to make this the largest gift, that organization is doing such an extraordinary, and you tell again
yes.
the story of the organization.
And in a sense, that comes full circle to Quid Pro Quo and the idea of board members and their role, because board members certainly can and should go to people who have more capacity than them, but they first have to have made what for them is a significant gift or a stretch gift, right? Without that, we can't get our board members to do quality fundraising because they're not in a strong position.
And if the board doesn't care, why should anybody?
Exactly. Good place to wrap up Quid Pro Quo fundraising, though we could spend hours on this like any of our topics. So as always, thanks, Jerry, for sharing your wisdom.